On this podcast, we like to discuss the most recent installment of a different series every show. As such, we'll be talking over part 1 of the 4-part Showtime series, referencing the reviews and playing some games. It's April 12th. You're listening to today's episode. I do have a quick game for you if you want to play it.
Sure.
All right. It's about heists, but this one's food-related heists.
It's food-related?
There's a lot of heists that happen in the world that we just don't really think about.
But there's people that steal food?
Yeah. So one of these isn't true, though. So you had to identify which one.
I feel like one of these is going to be like the golden pizza guy, and some people actually tried to rob him out.
These are all pretty big.
Okay.
There's a lot of, but
so any that I might have heard of before?
Maybe.
All right.
You know, I had heard of one before because of the Netflix series Dirty Money. So maybe if you've seen that. The first one is Red Vine Heist. In 2014, security footage confirmed 3 strangers loaded up and stole 70 pallets of red vines in the middle of the night from a warehouse in Pennsylvania. Though the price tag was only a tepid $17,000 worth of product, they were never caught.
Okay.
All right, the next one is the Wisconsin Cheese Heist. And in 2016, these are back-to-back
I know there
heists.
has to have been some. Yeah, I think I've heard of cheese heists before.
Oh, cheese heists happen all the time, but these were kind of big.
Okay.
2 criminals who knew exactly what they were looking for stole a truck cab from another company and parked it across the street from a lot with the cheese. So there was a truck with cheese, and there was a truck that they rented. And once they located the trailer full of cheese, they confirmed its contents. They pulled the cab around, hooked it up to the trailer, and drove off with the $70,000 worth of cheese. A week later, across the state, $90,000 worth of Parmesan was stolen.
Okay.
I like to think it was one big Parmesan roll. Like, it wasn't even a bunch of different tiny rolls. It was like one big $90,000.
When did this take place?
This happened in 2016.
Okay.
Back to back.
Yeah.
Another back-to-back heist was the Nutella chocolate heist, where 20 tons, that's 40,000 pounds, of Nutella was stolen in 2017, and a week later, I think the German authorities had to come out in a paper and say something along the lines of, if anybody's selling a lot of chocolate to you, be suspicious. A week later, a separate trailer filled with 30 tons of fruit juice was then stolen within that weekend.
All right, so we have the Nutella, the cheese, and the red vine.
Yes, and the last one is the Great Canadian Maple Syrup Heist.
Oh my God, okay.
This is a heist that lasted for over a year. From 2011 to 2012, the thieves used trucks to transport barrels to a remote sugar shack where they siphoned off maple syrup, refilled barrels with water, then returned them to the facility. So it was like a Breaking Bad thing.
I was going to say the Breaking Bad
train. It was straight
train.
up from the, But they were caught this way. An inspector came in just to check out the thing, and he ended up tripping over one of the barrels, expecting it to explode with maple syrup, but it was nearly empty. Uh-huh. So they were just like, okay, something's going on here. And then I think they did catch some of these people. But yeah, so those are the 4 of them. And
I'm going to guess that the one that's fake is the Red Vines one.
Is that just because I was adding like subcontext with everything else, and then
no, it was actually because you added subcontext to the other ones, like the Nutella.
That's what I'm
saying.
saying.
Yeah.
I was just like adding a bunch of stuff afterwards.
Yeah.
Not to the I found the other one so interesting, I had to give it away, sort of. The Red Vine Heist sounds interesting though. Like that could happen.
70 pallets.
70 pallets compared to the other things. That was 40,000 pounds of chocolate, of Nutella.
Yeah.
Like of
no, I think
that's like a freaking cement truck.
I had to have heard the Nutella one before because
there've been more than one.
Wait, there've been more than one.
Before the 2017 one, there was like one in 2004 or something that also people stole a bunch of Nutella. They really like their Nutella back in or up in England. So
I heard the title for this show, and I heard that it was a docuseries. It's kind of funny, but I thought that this was going to be like a history on how they discovered lightning or something like that.
I thought you were going to tell me you thought this was like the next Percy Jackson show, because you know that one's coming out pretty soon, right?
Well, yeah, but no, I knew it was going to be a documentary series, though. But I really did think that this was going to like take place in the 1800s, and I was going to like see recreations.
It's a period piece.
Yeah, but no, so it was like very shocking when it started out, and I was seeing like robberies and journalists come in, and even heavyweight champions, and I was like, are they just coming in for the publicity of it all? Because this like goes through 15 minutes even before we hear the name Lee Murray, who is the one who orchestrated this robbery. Apparently, I think it was like the biggest robbery to ever happen in London.
Almost $100 million if you were to convert it.
Yeah, because 20 million quid was stolen. Originally, they thought it was 1 million quid at different points, and then you get like all these different interviews. In fact, it's kind of overwhelming at the beginning because of how many different people they start like showing. You have Andy, he was a detective sergeant of Kent Police, Paul Chesson, Duncan Campbell, they're both journalists, Anderson Silva, again, a former UFC member, and then Dave O'Donnell.
A former UFC member, considered the best UFC player of all time. Or like, not player, but like athlete of all time.
I think it was a champion. Yeah. So
you think? Okay. All right. Yeah.
So yeah, like after all this happened, I was interested to see where the show was going. And
I mean, I was surprised that from what you're saying, that part one didn't deal mainly with just Lee Murray's career. I thought maybe you wouldn't even know that it was a heist show.
Well, that's actually the thing because like after the first 15 minutes, which I found pretty entertaining, that's when we hear Lee Murray, and that's when we switch almost completely. Not only the tone of the show, also the history of the show, but even the people that are interviewed for the show. Mm-hmm. I mentioned all those people that like, again, the detective sergeant and the journalist, but no, they like end up going away after those first 15 minutes, and then it is just a ton of UFC members talking about Lee Murray. Mm-hmm. And apparently this guy was incredibly violent. If you were on his wrong side, he would not have a problem beating you up. And I'd say like 50% of what they were saying was interesting.
I mean, Conor McGregor is pretty violent himself outside of the ring, too.
I think,
but this guy was like a gang member. He had ties to
Paul Allen.
He would get stabbed over the weekends, like when he went out to bars.
There's actually like a huge segment of this episode that is dedicated to an alleyway brawl that ended up happening.
Is that the one where he got his nipple cut off? From what I understood.
What? No, I don't.
Yeah, apparently he had his nipple cut off one week, and then the next week he got into an even crazier thing where he almost died 3 times, and then he still wanted to just go back to fighting. But by then the sponsors were like, I don't think we can put this guy out there on TV and have all these like random scars on his body that might open up. So yeah, his career was very interesting.
I think you should think whenever Lee Murray, because I didn't know anything about like UFC or him in general.
Or mixed martial arts.
I think you have to think of him as like Michael Jordan, but angrier, meaner, and also just like crazier.
He's not considered the best MMA fighter of all time. He did lose.
You had people.
He's very good.
You had UFC members saying that he was the most determined MMA fighter ever, and that he was like would practice the most. Like you had people saying that he basically was the best.
I wouldn't say he's the Jordan of it, but yeah. All right. So you learn about this guy. Do you start at his like childhood and work your way up?
Yeah, and that's when the show was interesting. You learn that he was kind of in the London version of the projects, and yeah, he didn't really have that much like of a father figure growing up.
Okay.
And that kind
grew up in poverty, but I think his dad was Moroccan. Like I think they have talked about him before.
Well, sorry, actually, they might have thought a figure. What I was thinking was more the teachers. Like, they even said this. The teachers sold cannabis to students. And, like, apparently that's how bad of an area he was living in at the time. And then he was in and out of prison. Again, he was working, as we said, with known criminals. I think, the main member's name was Paul Allen. And 1998 is when he met his wife. And, in fact, you even get his wife interviewed in this episode. She's completely in black, like, you can't see her face.
Oh, wow.
They say that her name is Nicola. I wasn't sure if that was true, but also like I'm sure her voice is also kind of modulated, so you can't really tell who it is. They also interview his friends, and then he like kind of joined the MMA around I think 2000, where he trained with this really tough group, and that's when we kind of learn about this guy named Pat. They even interview him in the show, and I think that he was the person to really train and kind of bring Lee Murray bring his like inner rage kind of out, because whenever he would fight, I know that you said that he would lose some, but they only really ever show clips of him like winning and just like completely pummeling people. In fact, even during one of the fights, it's near the ending, and I forgot who he's fighting, but I think it's the last fight they show. He it's Jorge Rivera. That's actually his name.
Okay.
He like walks out as Hannibal Lecter, and I thought
That's a known thing.
I thought that they were going to like show him losing because they even show him on the ground, but no, he ends up like using his legs and somehow putting him in like a triangle chokehold and winning. It's craziness, and it's kind of fascinating to hear about. But you always, it seemed like for the other 50% of the show that I was talking about, get either one person talking about Lee Murray, and then they'd be like, he's someone you didn't want to mess with. And then you would have like 5 other people coming in there being like, yeah, Lee Murray was just insane. Lee Murray was, you didn't want to get on his bad side. And it would continually be so repetitive. Like, you can only hear someone was so hardworking so many times and then be hit over the head with it from all these other UFC members being like, yeah, I can't believe
also, you have to keep in mind with boxing, or even like, because I'm saying UFC, and then I'm thinking like WWE, even like where it's all about the hype, right?
Yeah.
The hype up to the fight. And though MMA is like a real sport where people are putting their lives out there, or I mean, they're getting beat up real bad.
Well, no,
like,
lives isn't actually a bad thing to say, because like I was saying, a huge segment, I'd say 20 minutes or so, was dedicated to apparently this brawl that happened. So Tito, he was apparently a different fighter. I think that he also is considered to be one of the best. He kind of had a bad run-in with Lee Murray when they first met, and on that first night when they're all in an alleyway, like one of Tito's members, I think his name was Bo, went up to Pat and like playfully chokehold him, but didn't actually apply any pressure. However, one of them saw this and thought that he actually was choking Pat, so then it led to like a punch, and everyone just started apparently fighting. He got so bad, in fact,
brawl.
And this is, yeah, but this was where it was interesting. It got so bad, in fact, that like the police ended up showing up to the alleyway, but Pat had to go up to them, the police, and be like, look, A, you don't have guns. B, these are dozens of trained fighters. If you go in, because there's literally this like mosh pit of just people fighting in the background as Pat is explaining it to them.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, if you go in there, you're going to die. Like, there's no way that you guys are going to make it out alive. And as much as it seemed like sometimes some of the MMA fighters might have been inflating their own ego, it does make sense. I mean, these people, when you saw the like workouts that they were going through and just how determined they were, especially
like a Spartan.
For a fight like boxing, yeah, and how bad they would pummel some of these people. I mean, it made sense why they would do that.
Okay. So at what point did they say, okay, Lee Murray's career has taken a turn and he's almost over and now he's going to shift? Or did that not happen yet?
That didn't happen yet. And it seemed like, and this is what I liked about the show, again, another twist, it seemed like Lee Murray wasn't alive, but I think he is. I think he's going to be in the show. You hear him at the very end, at least, in jail.
Oh, he's definitely alive. And they have used prisoner, what are they called? Archival security footage from the heist. But I thought... prison phone calls. That's what they use. Prison phone calls.
Okay, so that was probably one of the things that we heard at the very end of the episode. That's how they ended.
Never before heard. And so that's what they added to the series.
Yeah, and it is interesting because I think it was like 6 members that were part of this robbery. That's when they do bring the detective sergeant of the Kent Police, Andy, back. And I should also mention, they say that Kent is this very populous area because it's right next to London. So a lot of tourists are always kind of going through there. And it's the gateway into so many other places in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, yeah. So, I mean, overall, it was way more interesting than I thought it was going to be.
So you liked it?
I would say so, yeah. I think that it does pass, but I mean,
docuseries these days are pretty good if they're put together well, and it seems like this one added new stuff. It's produced a little bit by Sports Illustrated, showed up on Showtime. It's just cool because, like, this is a story that happened back in, 2006, and then in 2008, the Sports Illustrated classic, as they call it, Breaking the Bank, came out, which kind of outlaid every single thing that happened step by step. In a special issue.
In this robbery.
And then Sports Illustrated is now like sort of producing it.
Oh,
so,
okay.
So I'm wondering how much of that they took from that, but that was called Breaking the Bank. This is called Catching Lightning. I mean, as far as what do we have to compare it to? How to Rob a Bank?
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, going back all the way to our 17th podcast, How to Rob a Bank, but I actually have it here, like, I think Forensic Files even is a fine thing you compare it to. Going into the fiction side, Heels and Creed, there are definitely, when you see some of the
How much
fights,
of Heels is in this? How much are they able to pull from that?
So I know that Heels is like WWE, like the fake stuff, right?
Yeah, it's literally called Heel as in the bad guy.
But I think it's more just like kind of, again, the wrestling aspect aspect of it all, because you always hear the crowd in the background and see the crowd, and it seems like everyone is into that as well. I know that was a huge part of Heels kind of with the production.
And then they also put in some like dramatic recreations. Do you see a lot of those?
Yes. Okay. So this is what I was glad about, and I was going to bring that up. So you do see that in the first 15 minutes, and I know that shows like to do that, and it's not the fact that they were
sometimes they're so corny though.
It,
I think Andy Richter talked about being in one once.
It always reminds me of the Tobias Funk Arrested Development. No matter how good they are, I'm always going to see it, and for that, I always kind of have a negative view of them. Thankfully, they really don't depend on that. I'm sure that as the show...
Even the actors, I was like, who are these people? I can't find them in anything else.
Yeah, because I'm sure as the show goes into more of the robbery, you probably will see more of those dramatic recreations. I was just glad that they definitely toned it down. And by the point that you get to them actually talking about Lee Murray, it's not even really a problem because, again, they just kind of resort to old clips, which is way more interesting and I think kind of gives you more information as well.
So how much of the heist have you not figured out yet, or have you not been told? Does it still feel like 3/4?
I think so. At this point, we only know that Lee Murray was probably
the one. Just know the amount.
Yeah, we know the amount, and we know that he was probably the one who I think was the main person,
the mastermind,
behind the situation. But except for that, it was either 4 or 6 people. Yeah, we don't have any information on them at all. We only know that again, the detective sergeant originally got a call, I think in the middle of the night or at like 4 a.m. and he learned that it was 1 million quid. And then when he got to the actual place, one of the officers was like, no, it's 20 million.
Yeah, I'm not going to ruin too much about the actual thing if people want to watch the rest of the series. However, I will say that it's speculated that had they stolen a less amount, had they not been greedy and gone for the biggest bank heist in like all of history, or at least in modern history, they might have gotten away with it.
Well,
because the international like spotlight went on them when it became that big a news story.
Yeah.
Had they cut off at just a few $1 million, they're saying, hey, these guys had such a decent starting plan that it may have gone out differently.
Even with the amount that they stole, they do show some of the police officers, and even with the international spotlight on these robbers, still couldn't figure it out. Literally, you had one of the police officers in an interview going up being like, yeah, this is one of the most like highly orchestrated and planned out attacks that we've ever had to deal with in London.
And it's funny because in the Sports Illustrated article they also say that these guys aren't necessarily the smartest blokes in the world, but but that more comes along later once the heist is over. It's produced by Bat Bridge Entertainment. The director behind it, Pat Condolis, he has done things like The Scheme, LBJ, Triumph and Tragedy, Outcry. Those are all documentaries.
I was gonna ask, yeah.
And as far as the reviews, they've been pretty good. Like the Rolling Stone gave it a positive one. It has, I think, like a 7 point something on IMDb. Obviously, not a lot of people have seen it since it just came out, and it's also on Showtime, and it's also a docuseries.
I will give this a 6 out of 10 because
I like the rest of it.
I'm probably not going to. I know it's only 4 parts, but it seems like the episodes are kind of long. In fact, I think the pilot is the shortest.
Oh, is it?
But also, just the amount of people that repeat themselves. This could have been 45 minutes had they not had that.
That's a lot of sports documentaries. That's even the Jeter documentary.
I mean, that's fair, but it did kind of bring it to a point where I was just like, I get it after a certain while. You can only hear Lee Murray was such a violent guy so many different times. One thing he does at the end of the episode I didn't mention yet is that he was, after he wins against Jorge Rivera, he calls out Tito, who's in the crowd watching, and he's like, I want to have a fight between you and me, and you're a real man if you choose to fight me. And that's when one of the MMA fighters that they interview says it would have been a massive fight had it happened. So that means that Lee Murray, right after he did that, basically is when he did the robbery.
I'm wondering if maybe, that's interesting. Okay. I'm wondering if maybe they implement some of his career in the next 3 episodes.
I imagine they have to.
Like sort of with The Last Dance, where Jordan's career, like from the beginnings, humble beginnings to his... And then they showed the back end too, so like they showed the robbery at the same time.
At the beginning, I thought that it was going to be, okay, we're going to get Lee Murray, and then we're going to get the other people, their backstory. But it just seems like it's probably going to focus on him the most.
For sure.
I think that if you're really into wrestling, you're probably going to find this pretty entertaining. And I'm sure that they got a ton of people that I just don't know that are huge names.
It's weird how Andrew Silva came out of retirement or whatever to fight freaking Jake Paul and then lost. That makes the series worse, I think, in my mind. But that's my ending thought. All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.